Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we ask the age-old question, how did the nationalists, with more troops, better weapons, and all the big, shiny cities, still manage to lose the Chinese Civil War to the communists? I mean, seriously, this is one of history's great puzzles. If you were looking at the situation in 1945, the nationalists look like a sure bet, an absolute no-brainer. They had everything going for them. And yet, just 4 years later, they're fleeing for their lives to an island, and Mao is running the show. So, what on earth went so wrong? And spoiler, it wasn't because they ran out of tea. Turns out corruption, bad strategy, and oh yeah, the communists actually winning hearts and minds all played a role. It was this perfect storm of self-sabotage and savvy opposition. We're going to unpack exactly how you lose a war that seemed impossible to lose. All right, let's just take a moment to really paint the picture of 1945, right as World War II wraps up. To say the nationalists had the upper hand, well, that's the understatement of the century. First, let's just talk sheer numbers, okay? The nationalists had about 4 million soldiers. The communists, maybe 1 million. That is a 4-to-1 advantage. In almost any conventional war you can think of, that's pretty much game over right there. But it gets even more lopsided. This wasn't just about manpower. The nationalists were kitted out with modern, US-supplied gear. We're talking tanks, heavy artillery, and actual air force. Meanwhile, the communists were basically a scrappy guerrilla army with old rifles and not much else. So yeah, on paper, this shouldn't have even been a contest. Clearly, something else was going on beneath the surface.
And that's exactly it. This war wasn't really won on the battlefield with tanks and planes. It was won and lost in the villages, in the farms, and in the cities. It was a battle for the people.
And this is where the entire story just flips on its head. The communists had this one absolutely brilliant idea: land reform. They took land from the rich, powerful landlords and just gave it to the peasants. Instantly, you've created millions of people whose entire livelihood now depends on you winning. And what were the nationalists doing? The exact opposite. They were crushing those same people with a 60% tax hike while their officials got fat off corruption. And they were just masters at this stuff. They gave away an area of land about the size of the United Kingdom. Their propaganda wasn't boring pamphlets, it was traveling plays and songs people could actually connect with. And maybe most importantly, they treated their own soldiers with respect and welcomed deserters from the other side with open arms. You can just imagine what that did to morale on both sides. So they'd lost the countryside. What about the cities? Well, they totally blew it there too. And this one number tells you everything you need to know. 230%. That was the annual inflation rate. Think about that. Your life savings just gone. Their economic mismanagement was so bad it completely wiped out the urban middle class, the very people who should have been their strongest supporters.
And you don't have to take my word for it. This is a quote from the nationalist leader himself, Chiang Kai-shek, all the way back in 1936. He openly admitted how corrupt and inefficient his government was, and he basically predicted that if they didn't clean up their act, the people would rise up against them. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So, while the nationalists are losing the support of the public, they're also fighting a war inside their own organization. The difference in unity between the two factions was just night and day. You see, the communists had one single, undisputed leader, Mao. After his legendary Long March, he had this cult of personality. His authority was absolute. So when he made a tough call, everyone fell in line. No bickering, no dissent, just execution.
The nationalists, on the other hand, were an absolute mess.
It wasn't really a unified army so much as a bunch of different factions, each led by generals who were basically looking out for themselves. You had commanders just ignoring orders, defecting to the enemy, and their high command was so leaky that communist spies had an easy time getting inside. And some of the stories are just unbelievable. I mean, can you imagine your own top generals taking you hostage? That actually happened to Chiang Kai-shek. Later in the war, the general in charge of Beijing literally made a secret deal and just handed the city over to the communists. The whole structure was just rotten from the top down. So with a foundation that weak, that unstable, it's really no surprise that when the communists gave one final, decisive push, the whole thing didn't just bend, it completely shattered. The end came so fast it would make your head spin. It was a total domino effect. A key city falls in October of 48. A month later, the entire industrial heartland of Manchuria is gone. By January, Beijing is in communist hands. A few months after that, they take the capital, Nanjing. In just over a year, it was completely over.
And then came the final, fatal blow. Right in the middle of this collapse, Chiang Kai-shek resigns. Instead of steadying the ship, it created total chaos. No one knew who was in charge, commanders were getting conflicting orders, the government basically split in half. Any last hope of mounting an organized defense just, poof, it evaporated.
So in the end, yeah, the nationalists had more soldiers, better guns, and support from other countries. But none of that mattered, because history reminds us that having the bigger stick doesn't help if you keep hitting yourself with it. They weren't defeated by the communist strength. They were defeated by their own weakness. Stick around for more of these eyebrow-raising deep dives, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word. Unlike the nationalists, we rely on good communication. And a special nod to our producer, FireflyHaku, who makes this podcast run smoother than any 1940s supply chain. Grateful for your ears, spread the word, and join us again soon.